Hello everybody, welcome to the Beef Basics presentation. My name is Kaitlyn Swope and I serve as the Director of Consumer Affairs with the Pennsylvania Beef Council. I'm also joined by Nicole Hockenberry, who is our Executive Director at the Council. I want to start things out by just going over the goals for today and our presentation. So we're going to kick things off with an overview of the Pennsylvania Beef Council, who we are, what we do, and then we're going to step into some attributes surrounding Pennsylvania and our consumers here on the East Coast within the Northeast region. We're then going to head into the beef basics section. So we're going to walk through the beef life cycle, talk about how beef is raised, and then also touch on beef and sustainability, as well as beef's nutritional value. All throughout the process, we're going to weave in classroom lesson applications. You also all received a USB drive attached to an ear tag keychain that is filled with more resources than you'll likely ever use, but know that a lot of the classroom lesson application information that we reference can be found on that flash drive. So to get things started, I just want to kick things off with our mission at the Pennsylvania Beef Council. We serve as a unified voice for our beef and veal partners by sharing their legacy of commitment with the families enjoying dinner with us. Essentially, we fill that information gap from farm to fork and work in a couple different program areas that we'll touch on here in a moment. But to lay the groundwork, I just want to explain the Beef Checkoff. So it's a program focused and centered around maintaining and building strong demand for beef. The funds are used both at a national level as well as a state level. And anytime that a beef or dairy animal is sold, which in their lifetime, a beef animal is averagely sold about 2 to 3 times throughout the life cycle. So anytime that that animal is sold, $1 is collected. Those funds go towards education, promotion, consumer research, recipe and product development, and so on. So we're really the voice out there on behalf of beef farmers and ranchers, really just promoting their product. We also like to lay the groundwork that in Pennsylvania, people outnumber cattle 12 to 1. So for every head of cattle, there's 12 consumers. So as you can see, the people outnumber the cattle. Again, that just rings home true, really the need for our programming and that information gap. Here we'll talk about some attributes specific to Pennsylvania. We're home to just under 13 million consumers. No surprise, considering we have 2 metro centers, those being Philadelphia and Pittsburgh within the state. We're also home to 52,700 farms, but it's important to note that the average American is now at least 3 generations removed from agriculture. Again, just ringing true the need of programming to be out there, the need for you as educators to have scientifically accurate information to share with your students to really ensure that they properly understand and appreciate agriculture. We also heavy up on national research that is conducted on an ongoing basis. It really just keeps a pulse on consumers. What are their top concerns at any given time? So the most recent Northeast survey that we conducted revealed that among consumers within the Northeast, Pennsylvania included, health continues to be a top factor when considering protein meals at home, followed by taste, value, and safety. We also know that consumers within the Northeast are consuming less beef weekly, and we also know that they have less trust and low knowledge in beef production, but the good news is that they want to and are willing to learn more, which really provides us the opportunity, as well as you as educators, to really step in and share that positive story. As I mentioned a few slides back, our role as a state beef council is really extending national messaging within our state. Within Pennsylvania, we have kind of 3 core areas or audiences that we do this with. So we have our optimal eating experiences. That's engaging and interacting with folks at retail, at food service. We also have our optimal production systems, the beef quality assurance program. You heard Marty reference that. If you participated in the farm tour, the beef farm tour session previous to this one, so the beef quality assurance program really interfaces with beef producers. So we do a lot of work with our producers on a state level. We also have our optimal diet for health and nutrition. That's really interfacing with medical doctors, registered dietitians, retail dietitians, and so forth. Really just ensuring that they're armed with the latest beef nutrition research and that they have the tools in their toolbox to disseminate that information to their audiences. With that, I'm just going to pause. If there's any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box or the Q&A box. You can also contact us via our website, pabeef.org. So if you ever have any questions or things come up, feel free to reach out. All of our emails are listed there on our website. We're also happy at any time if you're thinking through how you can integrate any of this information into your lessons, or you have an idea but you're not quite sure how to put the pieces together, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to bounce ideas back and forth, get you whatever resources you need to make beef part of your lessons in your classroom and at your school. So with that, we're going to roll right into kind of the meat of our presentation, talk about the beef life cycle and raising beef. So here's just a few bullet points of what we're going to cover throughout the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes together. So the beef life cycle from farm to fork. So if you participated in the farm tour that Marty Yonner hosted for us, you'll remember that he is a farmer feeder. So he's involved in the feedlot or feed yard segment of the beef life cycle. But again, that just represents one part of the entire life cycle. So we're going to walk through that from start to finish. We're also going to talk about the beef quality assurance or the BQA program. Throughout all of this discussion, we'll weave in points about animal welfare, as well as the beef community's commitment to sustainable management practices, and really highlight the partnerships that beef producers have with veterinarians to provide safe, wholesome, and nutritious beef to the end consumer. Obviously, consumer expectations is something that's ever changing. Like I mentioned, we have market research that is being conducted at a national level throughout the year to really keep a pulse and an understanding on what beef customers are looking for. It's clear that customers want a great eating experience from food that was grown or raised responsibly. That is with care for the animals, for the natural resources like soil, water, and air. So we're going to really start this discussion by talking about, who is the beef community? We know that for generations, cattle farmers and ranchers have been dedicated to raising beef responsibly and in a way that is sustainable. As Marty mentioned during his farm tour, it's a way of life. It's the livelihood. So the continued viability of their operation then, now, and for the future generations really depends on everything being sustainable. And again, it's simply the right thing to do. Beef producers take great pride in producing wholesome beef for the end consumer. So let's walk through and take a look at the community of people behind beef, starting with our cattle farmers and ranchers. So, America's beef community is full of conscientious farmers and ranchers in all 50 states. Today, we're going to focus on the beef industry within Pennsylvania, but know that there are farmers and ranchers in all 50 states, and they're all doing their very best to raise cattle in an environmentally and socially responsible way. So understanding more about this community really can help bring clarity to a lot of the misconceptions about practices within the cattle industry. So to put some numbers to this, 91% of farms and ranches are family owned and operated. And then to break that down even further, 80% of feedlots and feed yards are family owned and operated. And within the United States today, there's over 882,000 cattle farms, ranches, and feed yards. And then you may be wondering, that's a lot of farms. What's kind of the average herd size in terms of beef cattle? So the average herd is just over 43 head. So if you think of, the demographics of Pennsylvania, really no matter where you live within the state, you can drive down some country back roads and, it's not uncommon to see cattle grazing on grass. So a lot of that in Pennsylvania, what you'll see is cow-calf farms. But again, a lot of smaller farms kind of make up the beef community. So with that, we have the farmers and the ranchers, but we also have people like veterinarians, animal nutritionists, researchers, academia, really just ongoing thinking through new ways, new innovative ways to solve problems, feed cattle, handle cattle. You also have folks like farm equipment suppliers, processing plant employees, retail associates, restaurant and food service staff, educators like yourself who really have some involvement within the process and impact, consumer behavior, consumer perceptions. So everybody plays a role in getting beef to the consumer. So before we get too far into the beef life cycle, if you were on the farm tour earlier, Marty touched on just some basic definitions surrounding cattle, but I want to make sure we all, understand the basic terms. So moving forward, you can kind of put the pieces together. Again, this is a great thing to share with your students because a lot of times, we all just say cows when we could be more specific. So to break it down, a cow is defined as a female who has given birth to a calf. A heifer is a female who has not yet given birth to a calf. A bull would be an intact male, whereas a steer would be a castrated male. And then a calf are any young cattle which have not yet been weaned from their mothers. So again, here's just a visual look through the entire beef life cycle. So the journey beef takes from farm to fork. This really just demonstrates the breadth and depth of the beef community. So again, just understanding this life cycle and all the different pieces and parts that are involved in it really will help answer one of the most basic questions that we often hear, which is, where does my beef come from? It's no surprise, or maybe it is, but the beef life cycle is perhaps one of the most unique and complex life cycles of any food. It takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years to bring beef from pasture to plate. And there's a lot of independent folks involved with it. So unlike pork or poultry, which is very vertically integrated, beef is not that way. It's very independent. As you can see, there's a lot of different people involved in getting beef from farm to fork. So with that, we're going to start off with the cow-calf farm. So these are the farms where female cattle, or the cows, are bred and give birth to a calf. Typically, each cow has 1 calf per year, and the gestation length for cattle is 9 months, so very similar to humans. And when calves are born, they weigh between 60 and 100 pounds. And calves, you're going to see them living off of their mother's milk and grazing on green pastures right alongside mom. So again, if you're driving through the state, it's really not uncommon to see cow-calf pairs out grazing on pasture. Like I mentioned, calves stay with their moms. and they're drinking mom's milk and grazing alongside of her. Calves are then weaned once they, anywhere between 6 and 10 months of age. At this point, they now weigh between 450 and 700 pounds. Most of these calves continue to graze on grass pasture. Like Marty mentioned during the farm tour, he gets a lot of his cattle from Virginia and West Virginia, and they would come from the folks who continue to graze the calves on grass. It's really important to remember and keep in mind that almost all beef cattle spend the majority of their lives grazing on grass. Whether they are grain finished beef or grass finished beef, they're still spending, upwards of 70 to 75% of their life grazing on grass. So the next step, as mentioned, the stocker and backgrounders are where Marty would receive his feeder steers from. So most cattle spend 4 to 6 months at a stocker or backgrounder, and this is really folks who just have access to pasture. Cattle continue to graze on grass. If needed, they're given supplemental feed. They always have access to vitamins and minerals to make sure all their needs are met. The other thing to keep in mind is that 35% of the land in the United States is pasture and rangeland. So oftentimes, people wonder why some land is pasture as opposed to, crop ground to raise food for human consumption. And the fact of the matter is that all the land that is used for pasture and rangeland is simply too rocky, too steep, or arid to support crops, which is really, a testament to the fact that cattle have the ability, due to the fact that they have a 4-chambered stomach, they can upcycle human and edible grasses and plants into a high quality source of protein that you and I as monogastrics are able to break down and digest. So once cattle are weaned from their mothers, they continue to grow on grass at the stocker or backgrounder. They're then moved to the feed yard or the feed lot. So majority of cattle are going to head to a feed yard or feed lot between 10 and 16 months of age, and they're going to stay there between 4 to 6 months, typically, somewhere in that 60 to 90 day window. Within the feed yard, they have constant access to food and water. As mentioned, there's many people who play a role in the beef life cycle beyond just the producer. So the feed yard's a prime example of this. That the cattle are fed a balanced diet, and that's monitored on an always-on, ongoing basis. So that the producer works with an animal nutritionist to make sure that the cattle are being fed a balanced diet of roughage. So think, grass and hay, grain, so corn and wheat. Really, that's for energy, to meet their energy needs as they're growing. And then there's also crop and food byproducts that are included within the ration. So this is very prominent and happens a lot in Pennsylvania. As you're all familiar, we're in the snack food capital of the world. So there's easy access, readily access to things like potato peelings, candy meal, distillers grains. So again, just a testament of cattle's ability to upcycle these food byproducts that would otherwise, end up in the landfill. So again, this just contributes to beef sustainability and the positive impact that cattle have on the environment. So as I mentioned, there's really a team at the feed yard who's looking after the animals. Folks like veterinarians, nutritionists, pen riders. So you saw the overhead shot of the feed yard. That would be more typical of what you would see larger feed yard out in the western part of the country. So pen riders are folks who ride on horseback through the pens and just monitor the cattle, make sure they're all healthy, make sure they're up and eating and drinking, and just exhibiting normal behavior. Within Pennsylvania, we have feed yards and feedlots. They're just on a smaller scale. So you wouldn't really see pen riders within Pennsylvania, but what you would see is beef producers doing the same exact thing, just by foot. You know, they're walking through the cattle every day. They're feeding them, you know, 2 to 3, maybe 4 times a day. So keeping a close eye on all the animals while they're doing that. Again, just the constant, you know, striving to do better and gain efficiencies. Really, you know, producers focus on this, minimizes the use of land, water, feed, and other resources throughout this stage of the life cycle. We also wanted to point out, and you know, it's kind of important to note considering Pennsylvania is such a dairy heavy state. Dairy cattle actually between 20 and 25% of the nation's beef supply originates from the dairy industry. So obviously that dairy cow, her primary job is producing milk. But once her career as a dairy cow is over, kind of her second career is as a beef animal. Dairy calves provide a high quality source of beef, and a third of USDA prime beef is actually coming from dairy cattle. So just a fun fact that we thought was worth including, considering Pennsylvania is such a dairy-centric state. So once cattle reach market weight, this is between 18 and 22 months. At this point, they're weighing anywhere from 1,200 to 1,400 pounds. Both grain-finished and grass-finished cattle are harvested in packing facilities. These are all modern processing facilities where skilled workers break down beef carcasses into the popular beef cuts that we're all familiar with seeing either at the retail case or on the restaurant menu. It's really important to note that the harvest process is based on scientific research, and this is to ensure the humane treatment of every animal, the production of a safe food product, as well as the safety of the employees in the plant. So when cattle arrive at packing plants, they are moved inside the plant in a quiet and orderly manner. There's little excess movement or unnecessary noise, and this really ensures that cattle remain calm, move smoothly. Packing plant technicians use a mechanical stunning device to quickly and effectively render each animal unconscious, and this is what begins the harvest process. It's also important to note that without a USDA inspector present, federally inspected facilities cannot operate. So USDA inspectors are stationed in all federally inspected plants. So they oversee the entire process to ensure safety, animal welfare, quality standards. On a state level, there's also state inspected plants who receive inspection by state employed inspectors. So there is a little bit of difference, and you'll all be emailed out an infographic that talks a little bit about the difference between federally inspected plants and then more independent type plants. But it's important to know that no matter where beef is processed, it's all being overseen by a USDA inspector. So all beef entering the food chain is safe, wholesome, and maintains those quality standards due to the oversight from USDA. So at the packing plant, they produce primals. So think of the loin primal, the rib primal, the chuck primal. They also, depending on the plant, will break those further into subprimals as well as trimmings for ground beef. These products are then either sent to a further processor where they're broken down into individual steaks, roasts, ground beef. There are still some supermarkets or butchers and restaurants that will fabricate individual steaks or roasts as well as ground beef. So it really all depends, what channel that beef is then moving to, whether it goes directly from the packing plant to a further processor, or whether it goes from a packing plant right to a retail or food service establishment. So we alluded to this before, but we wanted to just bring to life the Beef Quality Assurance Program. So it's really important to note, and this is kind of a reoccurring theme, that all of those involved in the beef community from the beginning to the end are dedicated to raising and supplying safe, wholesome, and nutritious beef. Also, everybody, is concerned for the welfare of the animal as well as environmental stewardship. The Beef Quality Assurance Program was established more than 30 years ago, and it's a voluntary program that trains farmers and ranchers on best practices. Major beef suppliers source their cattle from BQA certified farmers and ranchers. In fact, more than 85% of the beef in the United States comes from Beef Quality Assurance certified farms and ranches. Again, you'll see this theme that the BQA program is backed by science. All of the educational resources that are promoting animal care with beef producers, workers, truck drivers, it's all science-based. And the foundation of the program really centers on cattle health, cattle handling, nutrition, transportation, as well as worker safety. So this is an ongoing program where there's an advisory group consisting of farmers, ranchers, veterinarians, animal scientists, really continue to fine-tune those educational resources as new research or information becomes available. I also alluded to the fact that BQA has a focus on transportation. So there's actually now an entire training dedicated to those semi-truck drivers who are transporting cattle. And this program covers anything from biosecurity, how to properly handle the animals, loading and unloading the cattle, how to deal with adverse weather, as well as truck and trailer maintenance. So again, these programs are just examples of the beef community's commitment to proper animal care at all stages of the life cycle. So with that, I'm going to pause for a moment. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But we're going to shift gears into kind of a little bit of sustainability discussion and walk through that. So we know that sustainability means a lot of things to a lot of people. Traditionally, sustainability is thought of, from an environmental perspective, but there are three pillars to sustainability. So the first being environmental, then you have economic and social. So again, we're talking about the fact that beef production has to remain financially viable, safe for workers, and safe for public health for the industry to continue moving forward. It's also important that, we realize every food has a carbon footprint. So it's really imperative for us to consider diets more holistically and look at the cost and benefit of a food source. So we know that cattle expand the land available for human food production, and they do this while coexisting with and maintaining natural wildlife habitats. And we already talked about how cattle have the ability to upcycle human inedible plants into high quality protein. The U.S. has shown that cattle can be raised sustainably. And as I said before, producers are committed to continuous improvement and producing high quality beef even more sustainably for generations to come. We're going to walk through some common misconceptions about beef and the environment, just so you have the information and you can better have discussions, whether it be with students, peers, in your personal life, whatever it may be. But we know that there's a lot of misconceptions about beef's environmental impact. I'm sure many of you have heard people talk about cow farts and methane emissions. So while, this makes for an entertaining story, 85 to 90% of the methane gas that is emitted by cattle actually comes from them belching or burping. So it's not cow farts, it's actually them burping, which is all part of the fact that they're a ruminant animal. Chewing their cud is part of their digestive process. But it's important to realize that this biogenic methane actually plays an integral role in the carbon cycle. So plants such as grasses take in carbon dioxide, helping the plants grow, creating more food for cattle. The cattle then eat this grass and convert some of the carbon into methane, which is then emitted into the atmosphere by burping. In the atmosphere, methane has a short lifetime and is broken back down into carbon dioxide and water. That carbon dioxide is then reabsorbed by the plants, which completes the cycle. So it's important to note that beef cattle emissions only make up 3.4% of US greenhouse gas emissions. If you compare that to all agriculture direct emissions, so crops and livestock, that makes up 8.4% of US greenhouse gas emissions. So if you compare that to something like our transportation industry, that makes up 28%, or electricity is 27% of US greenhouse gas emissions. Another common misconception is that it takes thousands of gallons of water to produce a pound of beef. In fact, this would make you think beef is a major drain on water resources. However, it only takes 308 gallons of water to produce a pound of boneless beef. This includes and takes into account the water used to produce feed, grass, and hay for cattle. So it's important to also keep in mind that water isn't necessarily used, it's part of a cycle. So much like the methane we just talked about in the greenhouse gases, water is part of a cycle. So water is used to produce the things cattle eat, such as grass and grain. When consumed, majority of this water will then cycle out of the cattle, returning nutrients and water back to the earth. So water usage to produce beef is around 5% of US water withdrawals. And like I mentioned, much of this water is then recycled back into the environment. Another thing to keep in mind is that the beef community is committed to better understanding the environmental impact of beef production. So life cycle assessments are conducted to really get a better understanding on, where things are we improving. When we compare United States greenhouse gas emissions to global numbers, we're much lower than the global livestock figure of 14.5% of greenhouse gas emissions. And because of that, the US cattle production systems are really a model for worldwide beef production. The US beef industry has one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world, and we produce more of the world's beef with less cattle. So with that, I'm going to walk into some hands-on classroom application. So as mentioned, that USB drive that was sent to you all has all of these resources loaded on it. You can also always visit our website, pabeef.org, to find copies of these materials and more. But on the screen right now, you'll see some of the infographics that break down some of the topics we've discussed thus far, whether it be the beef life cycle, breaking down the difference between grass-finished and grain-finished beef, beef nutritional fact sheets, you name it, we likely have an infographic around it. We also, in the last year and a half, created some more hands-on worksheets centered around math, language arts. We knew these resources were in high demand throughout the pandemic, and we know that they'll continue to have application and meaning moving forward. So on the screen right now, you'll see the math worksheets that were developed. There's one for pre-K through K, grades 1 through 2, and then grades 3 through 5. So the math for each one is at the level denoted. So very nice, very turnkey. All of these worksheets also have answer keys. Nice things that you can leave for a substitute teacher or use during days where you just don't have as much time. On the screen now, you'll see the fact or opinion worksheets that were developed for grades 1 through 5. As mentioned, there are answer keys and examples for each of these. So again, pretty turnkey resources, things that you can implement within your classroom pretty easily. We also wanted to draw your attention to the Produced with Pride in Pennsylvania Beef Book. This was a joint collaboration between the Council and the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau's Friends of Ag Foundation, which you're all very familiar with. The nice thing is this book is available in printed format, as well as you can read the book in full through a digital version. So this is the first of its kind commodity book within Pennsylvania, and the development of this book really modeled other states that were seeing great success with similar books and providing classroom application. So this book highlights beef production within Pennsylvania and has a series of lesson plans that go right along with it. So again, the turnkey resource for you as educators to bring to life in your classroom. The other resource we wanted to make you all aware of is the Masters of Beef Advocacy, or MBA Next Gen program. This is a free self-guided online course that provides students, farmers, ranchers, really all members of the beef community, the tools and resources to become a beef advocate and answer tough questions about beef and raising cattle. This is a five modules to the entire course. So they're all self-guided and online. These are really targeted towards more of a high school level, high school age students. There are a lot of FFA chapters in the state as well as across the country who implement this training as part of their curriculum. They also have a classroom toolkit that goes right along with this. So there's a teacher's guide, there's grab and go lessons that pair directly with the online modules, as well as an advocacy planning guide, which really takes the skills that students learn throughout this module and make it, steer it into real life application. The thing we really like about this program is it's really just teaching advocacy at the core. So whether a student goes on and is directly involved in the beef industry or not, these tools and resources are really applicable across a variety of subjects. So just another benefit of participating in that program. I also wanted to just bring your attention to our website. We have a variety of resources on there, whether it be beef cut information. We have a database of recipes that are developed by the Beef It's What's for Dinner culinary team. We also have beef's nutritional information, culinary inspiration, more information surrounding the beef life cycle, research, you name it, it's on there. Feel free to utilize our website as much as you possibly can for all things beef. Again, the URL to get there is pabeef.org. And as we're wrapping up the session, we kind of wanted to bring things home by showcasing and sharing with you all beef's strong nutrient profile. I'm always saying, beef's nutritional benefits and the powerhouse that it is really the foundation for all, the other things in terms of including beef center of the plate, whether it's for your family, on a restaurant menu, you name it. So the infographic that you see on your screen is beef's top 10. So we know that beef is a popular source of protein, a delicious ingredient for healthy family meals, but there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to purchasing beef. There's so many different cuts. There's so many different cooking methods. Again, that's where our website really comes in and helps. Our beef cut chart has icons that break down what cuts are good for grilling, what cuts need marinated, what cuts are better for slow cooking. But again, want to share with you all those 10 essential nutrients that beef provides. Another common question is kind of portion sizes. How much beef should I be eating? What is a serving? So one serving size of beef is 3 ounces cooked. You might be saying, that sounds great, but what does that look like? So one burger patty should be the size of a hockey puck, and then a 3-ounce steak would be the equivalent of a deck of cards. So these visuals are just handy to keep in mind when you're trying to remember, how much beef is it recommended to consume in one meal. As I mentioned before, beef is a protein powerhouse, so it has a unique combination of high-quality protein, iron, zinc, choline, B vitamins. So there's a variety of health benefits included when including beef in your diet, just because of this unique combination of nutrients. There's no other protein food that delivers the same nutrient-rich package as one serving of beef for about 170 calories on average per 3-ounce serving of cooked beef. And we have numerous high-quality scientific evidence demonstrating that beef offsets nutritional deficiencies and really just serves as an integral part of a well-balanced, healthy diet. We're all familiar with, what is the role that protein is really playing in human health. We know it helps as a part of a healthy diet. There's weight management benefits, building muscle, which is kind of where our minds quickly go when thinking of protein. It's been shown, increased energy, as well as the satiety factor. So keeping you full longer. This is when we like to have the discussion, a lot of people load their protein during their dinner meal. We have a variety of recipes that incorporate beef into breakfast, lunch. Right now is prime summer grilling season, so it's not uncommon for me to be slicing up leftover steak from the night before and putting it on a bed of salad for lunch. Just really thinking through, how you can integrate this into additional discussions with your students, no matter what subject you're teaching. Another fun graphic that we like to show people is, all right, 1 3-ounce cooked portion of beef is providing me 25 grams of protein, which is about half of your daily protein needs. So what are some other common sources of protein that we all enjoy, but then what amount would we need to consume and at what caloric cost to get the same level of protein? So you'll see there on the screen, you would have to eat 3 cups of quinoa, and that would be 666 calories, or look at something like black beans, you would have to eat nearly 2 cups. So again, just showing you really the bang for your caloric buck that you're getting with beef. With that, we really appreciate you spending time learning more about beef, learning more about our program and the resources that we have to offer to you as educators. As mentioned, you can always learn more by visiting our website, pabeef.org, We're also on Facebook as the PA Beef Council, so feel free to give us a follow over there as well. We're always sharing recipe inspiration, showcasing beef producers, showcasing the different events that we're at. So we would love for you to follow us online on social media. And again, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out at any time with questions that you may have. Nicole and I's email is listed there on the screen. You can also find our emails on our website. With that, we greatly appreciate your time and dedication to learning more for your students and learning more about agriculture. So with that, we thank you and hope you have a great day.